My ex-husband stole the company I helped build, took our home, and left me completely homeless. And when he found out I'd inherited a fortune, I didn't just reject him. I took legal action that left his entire world in ashes. Ever wondered what it feels like to have nothing left to lose, and then suddenly be given the power to build an empire? The icy November rain had a special way of turning Seattle's alleys into miserable, waterlogged tombs. It had been my home for 6 months now. Home, what a joke. Home was a 5-bedroom craftsman in Queen Anne, with heated floors and a view of the Space Needle. Home was a memory that felt like it belonged to someone else. My current residence was a rotating collection of dumpsters behind upscale restaurants where the trash was at least high quality. Tonight's treasure was half a soggy panini, which I was eating under a flimsy awning as the cardboard I'd collected for a bed slowly turned to mush. My hands were numb, my jeans were stiff with grime, and the voice of my ex-husband Mark echoed in my head as loud and clear as it was the day the judge's gavel fell. Nobody wants a failed artist with nothing to her name, Lily. You're worthless without me. He'd said it with a smirk, his perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit a stark contrast to my frayed legal aid blouse. He stood there, the golden boy, CEO of Oratech, the billion-dollar company we had started in our garage, with nothing but 2 laptops, and my designs, my user interface concepts, my branding, my logo, the very soul of the company. But on paper, I was just the founder's supportive wife, a creative consultant with no equity. I was young, stupidly in love, and I trusted him when he said putting everything in his name was just simpler for business. Simpler for him to erase me, it turned out. The divorce was a bloodbath. His lawyers painted me as a gold-digging spouse who contributed nothing but aesthetic opinions. They produced documents I'd signed without reading agreements that waived my rights to everything. He got the house, the cars, the savings, the company. I got a single suitcase and a restraining order after I threw a brick through his office window. It wasn't my finest moment, but seeing my designs used in a national ad campaign with his new girlfriend, our former assistant, as the face of the brand, something inside me just snapped. He was not only stealing my past, he was building his future on its bones. So here I was, 34 years old, with a world-class design degree and a portfolio that had launched a billion-dollar brand, huddled in an alley, fighting a rat for a piece of bread. The irony was so thick, I could choke on it. I laughed, a bitter, rasping sound that turned into a cough. This was it. This was rock bottom. Mark was right. I was worthless, a failure, a ghost, haunting the edges of a city I once thought I owned. That's when the headlights cut through the gloom. A sleek, black town car, the kind that costs more than I'd made in my entire life before Mark purred to a stop at the mouth of the alley. It was so out of place, it felt like a hallucination. I froze, my half-eaten panini clutched in my hand, probably security for the building here to tell me to move my 5-star cardboard box somewhere else. But then the back door opened. A man in a ridiculously expensive-looking charcoal suit stepped out holding a black umbrella that seemed to repel the rain with sheer force of will. He was older, maybe in his late 60s, with silver hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He didn't look disgusted or annoyed. He just looked purposeful. His polished leather shoes clicked on the wet pavement as he walked directly toward me. "Excuse me," he said, his voice a low, calm baritone that cut through the sound of the downpour. "I'm looking for a Lily Hayes." I flinched. "Cops, debt collectors. One of Mark's lawyers here to serve me with another lawsuit for breathing in his general direction." I pulled my thin jacket tighter. "Never heard of her," I mumbled, my voice hoarse. The man didn't even blink. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze analytical, taking in my matted hair, the dirt on my cheeks, the desperation in my eyes. He pulled a photograph from his inner pocket, a picture of me from years ago, smiling at a gallery, opening my hair, clean, my eyes bright. The woman in that photo was a stranger to me now. Lily Hayes. He repeated, his voice firm, but not unkind. 34 years old. Graduated from the Rhode Island School of Design. Formerly resided in Queen Anne. You were identified by a private investigator who has been searching for you for the past 3 months. My heart hammered against my ribs. A private investigator. This was serious. This was Mark. He was trying to ruin me even further, to make sure I could never even crawl out of this alley. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice shaking. "You have the wrong person." He simply looked at the photograph, then back at me. A flicker of something, maybe sympathy, maybe just professional confirmation, crossed his face. "There is no mistake." He folded the picture away. "My name is Arthur Kensington. I am an attorney and the executor of the estate of the late Eleanor Vance." The name hit me like a ghost. Eleanor Vance, the eccentric old woman from the nursing home where I'd volunteered as a teenager, the one who told me wild stories about running a publishing house in New York, the one who loved my sketches and told me my art had fire in it. I hadn't thought about her in over a decade. I heard she'd passed away a few months ago. My mind was reeling. Eleanor, what does she have to do with this? Mr. Kensington stood tall, the rain dripping from his umbrella, a perfect circle of dryness in my soaking, wet world. He looked me straight in the eye, and the words he said next shattered the universe. "Ms. Vance passed away 4 months ago. In her last will and testament, she named you as the sole beneficiary of her entire fortune." He paused, letting the words hang in the air between us. "An estate Ms. Hayes valued at approximately $47 million. $47 million. The words didn't compute. They were just sounds, foreign and nonsensical. I stared at him, at his serious face, at the impossible luxury of his car, and I felt a hysterical bubble of laughter rise in my throat. This had to be a dream, a cruel, elaborate prank. Or maybe I'd finally lost my mind. Maybe the hunger and the cold had finally cracked my sanity. I was a homeless woman eating garbage. People like me didn't inherit fortunes. People like me just disappeared. My entire world stopped. Have you ever had a moment that felt so impossible you were sure you were dreaming? Let me know in the comments below. And you are definitely going to want to hit that subscribe button, because what happened next was even more unbelievable than the money itself. The sensation of hot water from the luxury hotel shower felt like an electric shock. I'd been standing under the spray for nearly an hour, trying to wash away not just the grime of 6 months on the streets, but the disbelief that was so deeply embedded in my mind. The Fairmont Olympic, the suite Mr. Kensington had booked for me, was larger than my first apartment. Egyptian cotton sheets, an impossibly soft bathrobe, and a minibar full of things I was afraid to even look at the price of. I caught my reflection in the massive, steam-free bathroom mirror. The hollow cheeks, the sunken eyes circled in gray, the matted hair now clean, but still hopelessly damaged. The woman looking back at me looked like a cornered animal, if feral and afraid. Was this what a millionaire heiress looked like? I wrapped myself in the bathrobe, the plush fabric an alien sensation against my skin. A gnawing hunger clawed at my stomach. I'd called room service, my voice trembling as I ordered a hamburger and fries, feeling like an imposter who was about to be found out. When the food arrived, I devoured it, forgoing all etiquette, focused only on filling the void that had been gnawing at me for so long. Every bite was an affirmation that this was real. Maybe. Mr. Kensington had said he would return in an hour to discuss the details. That left me just enough time to panic in 10 different ways. This was a mistake, a case of mistaken identity. Or worse, some cruel scheme of Mark's. He had the resources to hire actors to stage this entire thing just to watch me get my hopes up before crushing them again. He would find that amusing. Paranoia was an armor I had worn for so long. I didn't know how to take it off. When the doorbell chimed, I jumped. It was Mr. Kensington, looking just as formal and composed as before. He entered, placing a thick leather briefcase on the glass coffee table. "Ms. Hayes," he began, his tone all business. "I trust you've had a chance to settle in. I understand this is a considerable shock. Shock doesn't begin to cover it." "Mr. Kensington," I replied, my voice still raspy. "I'm still not convinced I'm not dreaming." "Why me?" I knew Ms. Vance as a teenager, a volunteer. "We haven't spoken in almost 15 years. Mr. Kensington opened his briefcase and removed a thick file. "Ms. Vance followed your career from a distance, Lily. She clipped the articles about the launch of Auratech. She saw your name credited as the initial designer. She knew your talent. And she knew about your divorce." A chill went down my spine. "She knew she hired a private investigator a few months before her death," Mr. Kensington explained gently. "Not to intrude, but because she was concerned. She knew you had disappeared. She wanted to ensure her legacy found its way to you. She believed you were the only one who could understand it. Her legacy. I thought it was money," I said, feeling naive. "Oh, it's much more than that," he said, pushing a bound document across the table toward me. "This is a copy of Eleanor Vance's last will and testament. Yes, she left you her entire liquid fortune, stocks, bonds, properties worth approximately $47 million. That, however, is not the crown jewel of her estate." He paused, letting that sink in. "The most precious thing to Eleanor was Vance Publishing. Vance Publishing." I remembered her speaking of it with a fierce pride. A small but prestigious independent press she had inherited from her father, famous for discovering new literary talent. "She left me the publishing house," I asked, confused. Graphic design and book publishing were two entirely different universes. "She did," Mr. Kensington confirmed. "She left you full ownership of Vance Publishing. However, there is a condition." Of course, there was a condition. Things like this never came without strings. I held my breath. "Vance Publishing, I'm sorry to say, is in dire financial trouble. For the last decade, it has been consistently losing money. Creditors are circling, and the board of directors wants nothing more than to liquidate the assets and sell it for parts." Eleanor refused. Mr. Kensington looked directly at me, his gaze sharp. "The condition in the will is clear. To inherit the full estate, including the $47 million, You must assume the role of CEO of Vance Publishing within 30 days, and you must make the company profitable within 1 fiscal year. I felt the air leave my lungs. Profitable. A company on the verge of bankruptcy in a year. I don't know the first thing about publishing. Eleanor believed you had what it takes, he said. She believed your creativity, your design vision, and your resilience were exactly what the press needed. She didn't need a businesswoman. She needed a visionary. And if I fail, I whispered, dread creeping in. If you refuse, or if you fail to make the company profitable within the year, Mr. Kensington said with a grim finality, then the entire estate, the publishing house, and the $47 million will be donated in its entirety to the American Library Association. You will receive nothing. I sank back into the sofa, my head spinning. This wasn't a gift. It was a test, an impossible test. Eleanor Vance hadn't just thrown me a life raft. She'd tossed me the keys to a sinking ship and told me to navigate it through a hurricane. I looked down at my hands, still calloused and scarred from picking through trash. 6 months ago, I was running the design department of a tech company. Now I didn't even have a bank account. Why would she do this? I asked, my voice laced with desperation. Why bet everything on a failure like me? Mr. Kensington handed me another envelope. She left a letter for you. She instructed me to give it to you only after you had heard the terms. My hands trembled as I opened it. Eleanor's handwriting was familiar, elegant, and strong, just as I remembered. My dearest Lily, it read, if you are reading this, then you have found your way. I am sorry to place such a burden on you, but I know you, Lily. I saw the fire in you when you were just a girl with a sketchbook. Mark did not extinguish that fire. He only buried it under the ashes of doubt. This press is my life, and it is dying. It needs someone who can see the beauty in broken things and has the courage to rebuild. It needs you. Do not think of this as a test of business. This is a test of will. Prove to him, and more importantly to yourself, that you are not worthless. You are a builder. Now go build. Tears welled in my eyes. The letter wasn't a request. It was a summons. It was the voice of someone who believed in me when I had completely given up on myself. I thought of Mark, of his smirk, of his venomous words. I thought of living in the shadows, feeling invisible. And then I thought of Eleanor, the woman who had seen something in me that I had long since forgotten. I looked up, meeting Mr. Kensington's gaze. The hesitation in me was gone, replaced by something hard and cold. Resolve. I'll do it, I said, my voice steady. When do we leave for New York? Mr. Kensington smiled for the first time, a small but genuine smile. Your private jet leaves in 3 hours. I stood up, looking out the window at the city that had broken me. I had nothing left to lose and a world to win back. But I had no idea that the real enemy wasn't just in the accounting books. He was waiting for me in the boardroom, and he was far more ruthless than any creditor. The private jet felt like stepping into a parallel reality. Hours earlier, I'd been worried about getting pneumonia in an alley. Now I was sitting in a plush, leather seat, sipping champagne I didn't know how to pronounce, as Manhattan unfurled below like a glittering diamond tapestry. The transition was too sudden, too violent. I felt dizzy, not from the altitude, but from the whiplash of fortune. A part of me was still waiting to wake up, back in the cold, damp reality. Mr. Kensington had given me a thick dossier on Vance Publishing during the flight. The numbers were terrifying. Declining sales, mounting debt, and a roster of authors who had once been their pillar, now leaving for bigger houses. The company was slowly bleeding out. The dossier also included bios of the board of directors. They were all older men, old friends of Eleanor's father, who had been in publishing since before the internet. Reading between the lines, I could see the problem clearly. They were dinosaurs, refusing to accept that a digital ice age had arrived. The car took us from the airfield to an old brownstone building in the Flatiron district. A tarnished brass plaque read Vance Publishing, Est, 1948. The place had an old-world charm, but also an air of neglect, like a forgotten library. As I stepped inside, the smell of old paper and dust enveloped me. The lobby was dark, and the woman at the reception desk looked surprised to see anyone walk in. "Mr. Kensington," she said with a nod. Then her eyes fell on me, an up-and-down glance that sized up the new clothes Mr. Kensington's assistant had bought for me. It was a navy blue power suit, but I felt like a child playing dress-up. And this must be Ms. Hayes. Her voice was frosty. Clearly word had spread. The board meeting was in an oak-paneled room under a dusty chandelier. 5 men sat around a long mahogany conference table. And as I walked in, all conversation stopped. The silence wasn't respectful. It was heavy and hostile. I could feel their eyes dissecting me, judging me, and dismissing me in a single glance. A man with a shock of white hair and a ruddy face, whom I recognized from the files as Richard Carmichael, the chairman, spoke first. "Ms. Hayes, we've been informed of this unusual situation. A tragedy, Eleanor's passing." His voice dripped with false sincerity. "She was a wonderful woman, if a bit eccentric in her later years." Her eccentricity clearly peaked with this provision. Another man, a thin man with thick glasses, muttered just loud enough for me to hear. I clasped my hands together under the table. "Gentlemen," I began, trying to keep my voice steady, "I understand my presence here is a surprise, but I am here to honor Ms. Vance's wishes and to work with you all to get this press back on the path to success." Carmichael let out a short, condescending laugh. "Ms. Hayes, with all due respect, you are a graphic designer. Your last known expertise was in the tech sector. This is book publishing. We don't make apps here. We make literature. And that literature is bankrupting the company." I shot back, sharper than I intended. A hush fell over the room. I knew I'd made a mistake. I'd come off as confrontational instead of collaborative. "Look, young lady," Carmichael said, leaning forward. "We were all fond of Eleanor, but she was living in the past. This company is sinking. The only sensible option is to sell the remaining assets, pay the creditors, and divide what's left. We already have a potential buyer lined up. A clean, neat solution." "Ms. Vance's wish was for the company to survive," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "And her will gives me controlling interest. A sale is not an option." The room erupted in grumbles of protest. They looked at me like I was a child spoiling an adult's game. They had already planned on carving up the spoils, and I was an unwelcome obstacle. That's when I noticed him, the only man in the room who wasn't a silver-haired relic. He sat at the far end of the table, silently observing. He was about my age, with dark hair and intelligent, piercing blue eyes. The file had identified him as Alex Sterling, the editor-in-chief. He'd been with the company for 10 years, hired by Eleanor herself. Unlike the others, he wasn't looking at me with contempt, but with a wary curiosity. He was trying to figure me out. "We have authors to pay, printers to settle with." "Carmichael, continued his voice rising. You can't just waltz in here with your graphic design fantasies and expect to save this ship. You don't even know where the holes are. Then show them to me, I said, turning to Alex. Mr. Sterling, you're the editor-in-chief. You know better than anyone what's working and what isn't. I want to see everything. The rejected manuscripts, the sales reports, the failed marketing strategies. I want to see the mistakes. Alex looked at me for a long moment, then at Carmichael, who was scowling. Finally, he gave a curt nod. Fine, but you're not going to like what you see. The meeting ended on a tense note. As the others filed out, complaining under their breath, Alex remained. Are you serious about this? He asked, his voice lacking the hostility of the others, just genuine disbelief. You know they're going to fight you every step of the way, right? They've been waiting for Eleanor to die for years so they could cash this place out. I know, I said. So why are you still here, Mr. Sterling? He glanced around the room, his eyes lingering on the old shelves filled with first editions. Because I owe Eleanor. She gave me a shot when no one else would. This place used to mean something. It used to be where important voices were discovered. I'd hate to see it picked apart by vultures. If there's even a 1% chance of saving it, I have to try. He looked back at me. But I'm not going to waste my time on a lost cause. Prove to me you're not one. His words were both a warning and a challenge. He could be my enemy or my only ally. It all depended on what I did next. Ms. Vance's office, I said. I want to see it. Alex nodded and led me down a quiet hall. He unlocked a door at the end and pushed it open. The room hadn't been touched since her death. It was consumed by books piled on the floor, overflowing from shelves. Sketches, notes, and old book cover designs were pinned to a massive corkboard, and on her huge oak desk, under a thin layer of dust, sat a single leather-bound journal. I stepped inside, feeling like I was entering a sacred space. Alex stayed at the door, giving me a moment. I walked to the desk and opened the journal. It wasn't a ledger or a diary. It was full of ideas. Ideas for a new kind of publishing house, one that blended traditional print with digital technology. Notes on creating an online platform for undiscovered authors, on using graphic design and social media to build communities around books. It was a blueprint for innovation, a vision the board had clearly ignored or mocked. Eleanor hadn't been living in the past. She had been dreaming of the future. And as I flipped to the last page, I found a hastily written note tucked inside. Her handwriting was shaky, clearly written near the end. It was a single sentence. They think the foundation is rotting, but they don't realize they are the termites. A chill ran down my spine. Eleanor knew. She knew the problem wasn't the market or the authors. It was the men running her company. And she hadn't chosen me to fight the market. She'd chosen me to fight them. Eleanor's office wasn't just an office. It was a map of her mind. Spending the next few days in it felt like having a long, rambling conversation with her ghost. I had Alex bring me lunch and leave me alone. At first, he seemed reluctant, but after he saw me genuinely poring over every stack of paper, his skepticism seemed to recede, replaced by a cautious curiosity. He would linger at the door, asking what I'd found, and I'd show him Eleanor's sketches for experimental marketing campaigns, or her notes on transitioning to ebooks from a decade ago. She told them, Alex said one afternoon, his voice wistful. She presented a digital plan, almost identical to this, at a board meeting in 2015. Carmichael laughed in her face. He said, "Real readers don't stare at screens, Eleanor." "And now it's a multi-billion-dollar industry," I muttered, looking at her notes. I could feel her frustration, the rage of being surrounded by short-sighted men who couldn't see past their next quarterly report. The feeling was all too familiar. It was Mark. He used to dismiss my best ideas the same way, only to claim them as his own later, when they proved successful. He wanted a trophy, not a partner, Eleanor had written in an old journal entry I found tucked behind a book. She was writing about her long-dead husband, but the words resonated deep within me. In that room, I found more than Eleanor's business plan. I found a piece of myself again, surrounded by book cover designs from the 70s and 80s, the bold typography, the innovative layouts. I felt my own creative fire, which had been smothered by Mark's condescension, begin to smolder. I started sketching, not corporate logos or app interfaces, but ideas for new book covers, layouts for a modern website, a new brand identity for Vance Publishing that could honor the past while rocketing into the future. I found an unsent letter in Eleanor's desk drawer addressed to me, dated about a year after I got married. "My dearest Lily," she wrote, "I saw your wedding announcement in the paper. The boy is very charming, but I also saw the way he looked at you in the photograph. It was not the look of admiration. It was the look of ownership. I hope I am wrong. I hope your fire is bright enough that he cannot extinguish it. But if he does remember that ashes make the most fertile soil for a new beginning." She hadn't sent it. Perhaps she felt it wasn't her place. But reading it now, I felt an unbreakable bond with this woman. She had seen what I had refused to see. By the end of the week, I had a plan. It was audacious, a fusion of Eleanor's vision and my own digital expertise. It required a small initial investment from her personal estate, something I knew the board would fight, but it had the potential to create a new revenue stream and attract a younger generation of readers. On Monday, I called a board meeting. This time, when I walked in, I didn't feel like an imposter. I felt like Eleanor's rightful heir. "Gentlemen," I began placing a thick packet of documents in front of each of them. "Over the past week, I have reviewed the company's financials, as well as Ms. Vance's notes and vision." Carmichael picked up the packet as if it were contaminated. "And have you come to the obvious conclusion that we should sell?" "Quite the opposite," I said, my voice calm. "I've concluded that this company's problem isn't the market. It's a failure to innovate. It's a fear of change." I laid out my plan, the Vance Vanguard, a new subscription-only digital imprint that would release short-form short stories, essays, poetry from emerging authors. It would be curated by Alex, but designed and marketed entirely online, using targeted social media campaigns, partnerships with literary influencers, and a beautiful interactive platform where readers could discuss the work. It would function as a talent incubator where we could test new authors with low risk before signing them to a full print deal. Preposterous, the thin man with the thick glasses. Peterson scoffed. "We are a book publisher, not a blog. We are a dead company if we don't adapt," I countered. "This plan requires an initial investment of $250,000 from Eleanor's estate for platform development and initial marketing." Carmichael slammed his hand on the table. "Absolutely not. The will stipulates that you must make the company profitable, not throw good money after bad. We will not approve this expenditure." "I'm not asking for your approval," I said coolly. "As the controlling party, I have the authority to allocate those funds. I am merely informing you of my decision as a courtesy. The fury in Carmichael's eyes was volcanic. "You are overstepping. We will not stand by and watch you destroy what's left of this legacy. There will be consequences, Ms. Hayes. Mark my words." The meeting ended with the threat hanging in the air. I knew I had declared war. When I returned to Eleanor's office, Alex was waiting for me. He had a copy of the presentation. "That's a hell of a plan," he said, "and they hate it, which means it might actually work." "I need your help," I said. "I can handle the design and the tech, but I need you to find the talent. I need voices that are going to make people sit up and listen." Alex looked at me, and for the first time, I saw no skepticism in his eyes. I saw a spark of excitement. "I have a few names in mind," he said. "Writers that Carmichael and the others deemed too risky. Maybe it's time to take a risk." For the next few weeks, a new energy began to circulate through the building. At least on our floor, we worked tirelessly. I hired a small team of freelance developers and designers, turning an unused conference room into a makeshift command center. Alex reached out to writers, and submissions began pouring in. For the first time in months, maybe years, it felt like something new was being created at Vance Publishing. But Carmichael and his cronies weren't silent. They kept their distance, but I could feel them watching, waiting. They were planning something. I was so focused on building the future that I forgot that the ghosts of the past have a way of sabotaging the present. And their first blow came from a direction I never could have anticipated, hitting so hard it nearly destroyed everything before it even had a chance to begin. Our sense of cautious optimism lasted for exactly 3 weeks. I was in my war room reviewing mock-ups for the Vance Vanguard website when Alex burst in, his face pale. "We have a problem," he said, forgoing any greeting. "A big one." He slapped a letter on the table in front of me. It was from our main printer, Graphene Press, the company that had printed books for Vance Publishing for over 40 years. The letter, in cold legalese, stated that due to delinquent payments and future leadership uncertainty, they were ceasing all printing operations for us effective immediately until an outstanding debt of $300,000 was paid in full. What I gasped. The financials I saw showed we owed them maybe $50,000, and we were current on our payments. "That's what I thought," Alex said, his voice tight. "I just got off the phone with our CFO, Mr. Peterson." Peterson, the thin man with the thick glasses, one of Carmichael's cronies, and I pressed. And he said there was an accounting error. Apparently, we've been behind on payments for months, and he neglected to inform anyone. He said that with the sale of the company imminent, he didn't see the point in worrying about vendor relationships. Alex's voice dripped with contempt. My heart sank. This wasn't an error. This was a deliberate attack. Carmichael and Peterson had intentionally withheld payments to manufacture a crisis, to cripple our operations. Without a printer, we couldn't release our scheduled spring titles. Revenue would plummet, and we'd be in breach of contract with our authors. It was a kill shot. "Carmichael is behind this," I said, a cold anger rising in me. "He's trying to prove I'm incompetent, that I'm running the company into the ground." "And it's working," Alex said bitterly. "Word is already getting out. 2 of our major authors just called panicking. They're threatening to walk." For a moment, panic seized me. This was it. This was how they beat me. They knew I didn't have the experience to handle a crisis like this. I could feel the walls closing in that familiar sense of helplessness that Mark had been so good at instilling in me. I could almost hear his voice in my head taunting me. "See, Lily, You can't do anything without me. I took a deep breath, forcing the voice out. I wasn't that woman anymore. I looked at the letter from Graphene Press and then at the designs on my screen. Building and destroying, two sides of the same coin. Carmichael thought he was destroying, but maybe he'd just given me a chance to build something better. Okay, I said, getting to my feet. Plan A is dead. We need a plan B. What's plan B? Alex asked, not looking hopeful. They cut off our main supply line. They think they have us cornered, I said, beginning to pace. But they're thinking like 20th century publishers. They think the power is in the printing press. They're wrong. The power is in the content, in the authors, and in the audience. I stopped a wild idea beginning to form. The Vance Vanguard. We're moving it up. We're launching it not in 3 months, but in 3 weeks. Alex looked at me like I had lost my mind. 3 weeks? That's impossible. The platform isn't even built, and that doesn't solve the print book problem. Forget the print books. For now, I said, feeling a surge of adrenaline. We are going to release our entire spring list, the books Graphene is holding hostage as digital exclusives on the Vance Vanguard. We're going to turn this crisis into an event, a launch. The authors will never go for it, Alex argued. They have contracts for print books. They want to see their books on shelves. That's where your powers of persuasion come in, I said, looking him straight in the eye. Tell them the truth. Tell them the board is trying to sabotage the company. Tell them this is the only way to get their work to readers. And offer them a sweeter deal. A higher royalty rate on ebook sales. A massive digital marketing campaign that we will run ourselves. I gestured to my designs. We'll create beautiful landing pages for each book, video trailers, exclusive interviews. We will give them the kind of attention they would never get with a traditional print release. And how are we supposed to do all that? That in 3 weeks, he asked, his skepticism battling with a glimmer of hope. By working 20-hour days, I said simply, and by using a secret weapon that Carmichael could never comprehend. I spent that night without sleeping. I didn't call the developers. Instead, I did it myself. I tapped back into the person I was. Before Mark, the girl who could code a website from scratch, who could design an entire marketing campaign in 48 hours. I had forgotten I had that in me. Mark had made me forget. He always said the technical stuff was his department, that I should stick to the pretty things. By morning, I had a functioning prototype of the Vance Vanguard website. It was beautiful, intuitive, and it worked. When Alex came in, his eyes widened. You did this yourself. I co-founded a tech company, Alex, I said, with a tired smile. I didn't just draw pretty pictures. In that moment, I saw a shift in the way he looked at me. The grudging respect was gone, replaced by genuine admiration. Okay, Hayes, he said, nodding. You've got me convinced. Now, let me go convince the authors. The next 3 weeks were the craziest of my life. We lived on coffee and adrenaline. My small team worked around the clock, building out the site, creating marketing content. Alex worked his magic, calling every author, explaining the situation, with brutal honesty and unwavering passion. To our surprise, most of them agreed. They were outsiders like us, and they liked the idea of fighting the machine. On launch day, Alex and I stood in Eleanor's office, watching the monitor as the site went live. For the first few hours, there was a trickle. Then the literary bloggers we'd reached out to started posting. Tweets started flying. The sales started as a drip, then a stream, then a flood. By the end of the day, We had sold more ebooks than we had projected to sell in print in the first month. The phone started ringing off the hook. It was reporters from publishing trade magazines wanting to know about Vance Publishing's audacious digital-first strategy. Late that evening, Carmichael appeared at my office door. His face was a mask of fury and utter disbelief. "What did you do?" he hissed. "I did exactly what Eleanor hired me to do," I said, feeling a cool calm. "I innovated. I adapted. I saved her company from your attack." He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away without another word. I knew the war was far from over, but I had won the first battle. I had taken his most powerful blow and turned it into my biggest victory. When Alex and I finally locked up the office that night, we were both exhausted, but exhilarated. "You know," he said, a tired smile on his face, "I think Eleanor would have been proud." That compliment meant more to me than all the sales numbers. We had done it. We had survived. But when I got back to my temporary apartment that night, there was an email waiting for me. An email from an address I had long since blocked, but still recognized instantly. The subject line read, "Heard you're doing well." It was from Mark, and the cold pit in my stomach told me the fight with Carmichael had just been a warm-up for the real storm to come. Seeing Mark's name in my inbox was like a bucket of ice water. Every feeling of victory, every ounce of pride I'd felt over the last 24 hours evaporated, replaced by a familiar, cold dread. 10 years of psychological manipulation doesn't just disappear. He had an uncanny ability to make me feel small and insecure with his mere presence, even a digital one. My hand trembled as I clicked on the email. I was expecting anger accusations, a legal threat of some kind. But what I found was much worse. It was insidious. "Lily," it began. No dear or hi, just my name as if we'd spoken yesterday. "I read the article in Forbes about what you're doing at Vance. It's impressive. I always knew you had it in you. I just didn't think you'd find the courage to use it on your own. I guess I was wrong." Every word was a calculated payload, a compliment wrapped in an insult, the courage to use it on your own. As if I were a frightened child who had finally managed to ride a bike without training wheels. "Look," he continued, "I know things ended badly. I said things I shouldn't have. I was stressed with the company, and I took it out on you. I'm not excusing my behavior, but I want you to know I regret it. Seeing you succeed like this, it makes me realize what I lost. You were the best partner I ever had." The false sincerity dripped from every sentence. This was Mark in full charm mode, the mode he used to get what he wanted. He was planting seeds of doubt. He was trying to make me remember the early days, the good times, before his mask began to slip. "Auratech is going through a transitional phase," he wrote. "I could really use your creative brain on a new project. Maybe we could get coffee next time I'm in New York just to talk. As old friends, to find some closure." Closure. He wanted closure. After leaving me on the street without a penny and telling me I was worthless, I felt sick. This wasn't about closure. This was about him smelling money and success. He'd seen my name in Forbes. He'd seen the $47 million, and now he wanted back in. He couldn't stand the thought of me building something without him. My success was an affront to his ego. I slammed my laptop shut, my heart pounding. A part of me, a small shameful part that he had cultivated for years, whispered, "Maybe he's changed. Maybe he really is sorry." It was the voice of the woman who had loved him, the woman who had believed his promises. I got up and paced my small apartment. I thought about those years, the subtle criticisms of my clothes, My friends, my ambitions, the times he'd accidentally deleted my design files before a major presentation, the times he'd convinced me my ideas were too out there for the company, only to present them as his own 6 months later. It wasn't stress. It was a systematic campaign to break my confidence so he could control me. I didn't reply to the email. Deleting it felt like a small victory. The next day at the office, I tried to push it out of my mind and focus on work. The success of the digital launch had bought us some breathing room, but we still had a long way to go. I was in a meeting with Alex and the editorial team, discussing potential writers for the Vance Vanguard, when my phone rang. An unknown number. I normally would have ignored it, but for some reason, I answered. "Hello, Lily. It's me, Mark." His voice on the phone, smooth and confident, made my stomach clench. How had he gotten my new number? "Don't call me," I said, my voice ice cold, and stood up from the meeting. Alex shot me a worried look. "Wait, don't hang up," Mark said quickly. "I just wanted to make sure you got my email." "Lily, I really think we should talk. I made mistakes, big ones. Mistakes you call destroying someone's life." "A mistake," I hissed, walking into Eleanor's office and slamming the door. "I know you're angry," he said, his voice full of false patience. "You have every right to be. But don't let that anger cloud your judgment. We were an amazing team once. Think of what we could do together now, with your resources and my experience." And there it was, your resources. He wanted my money. He wanted my company. He wanted to leech off my success, like a parasite. "Never, Mark," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "This conversation is over." "That's a shame," he said, and the honeyed tone was gone, replaced by a familiar chill. "I tried to do this the friendly way, Lily. But you always have to do things the hard way. You're going to regret this." He hung up. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, trembling. It was a threat, a promise. I knew him. He wouldn't let this go. If he couldn't charm his way back in, he would try to burn everything down. Alex knocked and came in. "Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I took a shaky breath. I did. The ghost of my marriage. I told him about the call, about the phony offer, and the veiled threat. Alex listened intently, his expression hardening. "He sounds like a classic narcissist," he said, when I was done. "He can't stand that you're succeeding without him. He'll try to pull you down." "I know," I whispered. "I just don't know what he'll do." "We have to be ready," Alex said, his voice firm. "He'll find a weak spot and he'll press it." For the next few days, I lived in a state of anxious anticipation. Every email, every call could be him. But there was nothing. The silence was more terrifying than the threats. He was planning something. And then the blow came. It was a Friday morning. I was getting ready to leave my apartment when a news alert popped up on my phone from a popular New York business tabloid. The headline read, "Is Vance Publishing's Miracle Revival a hoax? New heiress has a troubled past." My heart stopped. I clicked on the article. It was full of lies and half-truths. It quoted a source close to the family who described me as emotionally unstable. It mentioned the restraining order, without the context that I'd thrown a brick at my ex-husband's office after finding out he was cheating and stealing my company. It implied that my recent digital success was due to stealing intellectual property from my former company. But the worst part was a direct quote attributed to an anonymous Vance Publishing board member. "We are very concerned," the source said. "Ms. Hayes is making reckless financial decisions without board approval. There's a sense that she is running this company into the ground, driven by personal whims rather than business acumen." I knew instantly who had said it. Carmichael, or one of his cronies. Mark had found my weak spot. He had found my enemies inside the company and allied with them. They were attacking me on two fronts. My past and my present were conspiring to destroy my future. The article was designed to scare authors, investors, and the entire industry. It was designed to make me a pariah. When I got to the office, the mood was funereal. Everyone had read it. The phones were ringing off the hook again, but this time it wasn't with congratulations. It was worried authors, vendors, demanding immediate payment. The stock that Eleanor had left me, the security of my wealth, had begun to dip. Mark and Carmichael had laid a perfect trap, and I had just walked right into it. The article was a slow-motion car crash. All day, the shrapnel kept hitting us. Our flagship author, a Pulitzer Prize winner, Eleanor had discovered decades ago, called her voice fraught with worry. "Lily, I believe in what you're doing, but my agent is going ballistic. He says this instability could damage my reputation." It was a polite warning, get this under control, or she would have to walk. Even worse, a venture capitalist who had expressed interest in funding the Vance Vanguard, after reading the Forbes piece, sent a curt email canceling our scheduled meeting. The damage was real and spreading fast. I called an emergency board meeting. As they filed into the conference room, Carmichael and Peterson avoided my eyes, but I could see the faint, smug smiles playing on their lips. They had landed a mortal blow, and they knew it. "I assume everyone has read the article," I began, my voice like steel. "It is filled with lies and malicious innuendo, and it quotes a board member of this company. I want to know who spoke to the press." Silence. "This is a blatant act of sabotage." I continued, looking directly at Carmichael. "It doesn't just hurt me. It hurts the company you all claim to want to protect. Authors are spooked. Potential partners are backing out." Carmichael finally met my gaze. "Perhaps if you were more transparent with the board, Ms. Hayes, we wouldn't have to read about your plans in the papers. The truth is, you are acting recklessly. The article simply highlighted our legitimate concerns." "Legitimate concerns?" I laughed, a humorless sound. "You call collaborating with my abusive ex-husband to leak disinformation a legitimate concern." A flicker of surprise crossed his face. He hadn't thought I'd connect the dots so quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know your ex-husband." "Oh, I think you do," I said, leaning forward. "Because the lies in that article, the ones about stealing intellectual property, could have only come from him. And the lies about the company's finances could have only come from someone in this room. It's quite a convenient collaboration, isn't it?" They were silent. They weren't going to admit anything. They were just going to sit there and watch me fail. I realized I couldn't fight them head-on in this room. I needed proof. I needed a weapon. After the fruitless meeting, I went back to Eleanor's office, feeling defeated. It felt like I was playing chess against an opponent who could see all my moves while I was blindfolded. Alex came in, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to me. "You look like you need this." "Thanks," I mumbled. "I feel like I'm drowning." "Don't let them win," he said softly. "That's what they want. It's what your ex-husband wants." He sat down in the chair across from my desk. "Lily, what did he do to you? Really, I only know what the article says, and I know it's garbage, but I need to know what we're up against." I took a deep breath, and for the first time, I told someone the whole story. Not just the condensed version of the divorce. I told him about the early days of Oratech, the excitement and passion, how Mark slowly began to dismiss my contributions, how he convinced me I didn't have a head for business, that I was just an artistic soul. I told him about the manipulation, the way he isolated me from friends, the way he made me believe I was nothing without him. I told him about the day I found the emails between him and our assistant, planning not just their affair, but how to legally squeeze me out of the company. When I finished, the room was quiet. Alex was looking at me, and there was no pity in his eyes. There was anger, a cold, furious anger on my behalf. "He didn't just divorce you," he said, his voice low. "He tried to erase you. And now he's trying to do it again," I said, feeling hot. Tears well up. "And this time, he has help from the inside." "Then we fight from the inside," Alex said, his voice firm. "Carmichael and Peterson, they work together. They're smart enough not to use company email, but they had to communicate somehow. They had to coordinate this attack with Mark." An idea began to spark. "The financials," I said, sitting up straighter. "When Peterson said there was an accounting error with the printer, that was a lie. There has to be a paper trail. There has to be proof he deliberately withheld payment. Our accounting system is ancient, but everything is logged," Alex agreed. "But only Peterson and his department have access to the deep files. As CEO, so do I said, a new resolve hardening in me. "And I'm betting they don't think I'll know where to look." That night, after everyone else had gone home, Alex and I broke into the company's accounting system. I hadn't looked at a complex balance sheet in years, but the logic was still there. It was like debugging code. You just had to look for the anomaly. We worked for hours, poring over expense reports, payment logs, and internal correspondence, and then we found it. Buried deep on a subserver, mislabeled, was a set of emails, not from Peterson's company account, but from a personal Gmail account he'd accessed on his office computer. Sloppy. The emails were between him and a lawyer representing a private equity firm, the firm Carmichael had mentioned as their potential buyer. Peterson had been feeding them internal financial information, inflated projections of the company's liquidation value. He was essentially helping them lowball the company so they could buy it for cheap, and in return, he was promised a high-paying position and a hefty consulting fee after the sale was complete. "This is fraud," Alex breathed, looking over my shoulder. "This is illegal. And this is our weapon," I said, feeling a cold surge of energy. But there was still a missing piece. How to connect this to Mark. We kept digging. And then we found it. A single, seemingly innocuous email from Carmichael to Peterson. "Spoke with MH today," it read. "He has some interesting info on our new friend. Should give our press contacts a great angle. Get ready for the fallout on Friday. MH, Mark Hayes." "Gotcha," I whispered. We had them. We had proof of Peterson conspiring to fraudulently sell the company. And we had circumstantial but undeniable proof that Carmichael had coordinated with Mark to leak the story to the press. I printed everything out, the feel of the pages solid in my hand. This wasn't just evidence. This was justice. "Tomorrow," I said to Alex, my voice firm. "At the board meeting, we are not going on the defensive. We're going on the attack. It's time to clean house." Alex looked at me in the dim light of the office, his eyes shining with admiration. "Eleanor knew what she was doing," he said softly. "She didn't choose an heir. She chose a fighter." And for the first time, I felt like he might be right. I was no longer the victim in Mark's story. I was about to be the villain in Carmichael's, and I was going to enjoy every second of it. When we left the office at nearly 3 a.m., the city was quiet. The air was cold, but I didn't feel it. I was burning with a clarity of purpose. Alex and I walked for a block in silence, the sound of our footsteps echoing on the empty pavement. The silence wasn't awkward. It was comfortable. Over the past 12 hours, We had transformed from wary colleagues into co-conspirators. We had fought a digital battle in the trenches together, and a bond of trust had been forged. "They're not going to see this coming," Alex said, breaking the quiet. "They think you're going to fold after that article." "The woman who would have folded died in an alley in Seattle," I said. And I realized it was true. "They're not fighting her tomorrow." He nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Good, because she would have been eaten alive." We stopped at the corner where we had to go our separate ways. "Thank you, Alex," I said. And I meant it. "I couldn't have done this alone." "We're on the same team, Lily," he said. And the way he said my first name, without the formal surname, felt significant. "Now, go get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." As I walked back to my apartment, I realized that the sense of isolation Mark had so carefully constructed around me for years was beginning to shatter. I had an ally, someone who saw me, who believed in me. That felt more powerful than any piece of evidence we'd found. The next morning, I walked into the boardroom with a chilling calm. Alex sat beside me, in neutral expression masking the tension beneath. Carmichael Peterson and the others were already there, looking smug and expectant. They expected me to come in, perhaps with an apology, an offer to compromise. They expected surrender. They didn't get it. "Good morning, gentlemen," I began, my voice even. "Before we begin the standard agenda, there is an urgent internal matter that needs to be addressed, a matter of loyalty and fraud." I placed a thick stack of papers in front of each of them. It was the printouts of the emails. Carmichael glanced at the first page, and his ruddy face lost a shade of color. Peterson began to sweat. "I have conducted an internal audit of our recent financial activities and communications." I continued, my voice echoing in the dead silence. "And what I have found is deeply disturbing." Methodically, without emotion, I laid it all out. I explained Peterson's scheme with the private equity firm, detailing the inside information he'd leaked. I presented the email trail that showed he had deliberately created the crisis with the printer to weaken the company's position. "This," I said, my voice, like ice, "is not just unethical. It is securities fraud and a gross violation of your fiduciary duty to this company." Peterson sputtered. This is a misunderstanding. These emails are taken out of context." "Then, please provide the context, Mr. Peterson," I challenged. "Explain to us the consulting fee of $200,000 they promised you." Peterson's mouth snapped shut, his face ashen. Then I turned to Carmichael. "And then there is the matter of coordination. Specifically this email." I pointed to the copy of the MH message. "Mr. Carmichael, could you inform us who MH is and what interesting information he provided you about me just before a defamatory article was published?" Carmichael stared at me. His eyes narrowed with hatred. He was cornered, and he knew it. "This is a witch hunt," he snarled. "You are using stolen information to attack those who disagree with you. I am using evidence to expose saboteurs who are trying to destroy this company from within for their own personal gain," I countered. "And I am done." I looked around the table, my eyes landing on the other 3 board members who had been silent and looked increasingly horrified. "Now, here is what is going to happen," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "Mr. Peterson and McCarmichael will tender their resignations from this board, effective immediately. You will both forfeit any stock options you hold. In return, the company will not pursue criminal charges. It's a much better deal than you deserve. You have 1 hour for your lawyers to look over the severance agreements Mr. Kensington is drawing up as we speak. I stood up. As for the rest of you, you have a choice. You can continue down this path of sabotage, or you can start working with me to actually honor Eleanor Vance's will and rebuild this place. Choose wisely. Alex and I walked out of the room, leaving a stunned silence in our wake. As the door clicked shut, I leaned against the wall, the adrenaline finally draining away, leaving me trembling. Alex put a hand on my shoulder. You did it. You actually did it. We did it, I corrected him. Within the hour, the resignations were signed. Carmichael and Peterson left the building for the last time, not looking anyone in the eye. An era was over. The dead weight of the past was gone. The news spread through the office like wildfire. For the first time when I walked through the halls, people didn't look at me with suspicion or fear. They looked at me with a newfound respect. I wasn't just the eccentric heiress. I was the leader who had taken out the trash. That evening, Alex asked me out for a celebratory drink. We went to a quiet bar near the office. We talked for hours, not just about work, but about everything, about the books we loved, the dreams we'd had before life got in the way. I learned he was a published poet. Before he went into editing, that he still wrote late at night. He learned I had once wanted to be a painter before I got swept up in the tech world. There was an ease between us, a connection that went beyond the professional. When he looked at me, I felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in a very long time. So what now, boss? He asked, a teasing glint in his eye. Now, I said, feeling a sense of freedom and possibility I had never felt before. Now the real fun begins, with no one in our way. We can build anything we want. The idea was exhilarating. We had cleared the rubble. The foundation was clean. But building something new from the ground up was a different challenge entirely. And I had a feeling that while we were celebrating our victory, Mark Hayes was still out there, watching and waiting for his next opportunity to strike. After all, a snake with its head cut off can still thrash for a long time before it finally dies, though it would be more accurate to call it a cleansing. In the wake of Carmichael and Peterson's abrupt departures, there was a power vacuum and a sense of unease that permeated the company. The staff was used to working in a toxic environment where stagnation was rewarded and innovation was suspect. Now the rules had changed, and not everyone was comfortable with it. I spent the next week conducting a series of listening tours. I met with every department, from editorial to marketing, from production to accounting. I didn't walk in with grand pronouncements or top-down decrees. I just asked questions. What's working? What's not? If you had a magic wand, what would you change about your job? What's the biggest idea you've had that you were too afraid to propose? At first, people were guarded. They had been trained to keep their heads down and follow orders. But as they saw, I was genuinely listening, actually taking notes and asking insightful follow-up questions, the floodgates began to open. Ideas that had been buried for years started to surface. A junior editor proposed a new line of graphic novels. A guy in marketing had a brilliant plan for a company podcast featuring our authors. It was like opening a window in a stuffy room. Fresh air rushed in. But not everyone welcomed the change. I could see it in the eyes of some of the more senior staff, the ones who had been Carmichael's protégés. They regarded my meetings with contempt. To them, I was still an outsider, a lucky kid who was disrupting the natural order of things. Alex was invaluable during this time. He knew who the real talent was and who was just warming a chair. Watch out for Henderson in the rights department, he warned me. He was Carmichael's golfing buddy. He'll try to sandbag every new contract we try to sign. The purge wasn't about mass firings. It was more subtle than that. It was about changing the culture. I promoted the people with ideas and energy. The junior editor with the graphic novel idea, she was given a budget to develop a full proposal. The marketing guy with the podcast idea, he was put in charge of the project. For the holdouts, I gave them rope. I assigned them tasks that required collaboration and forward thinking. When they couldn't or wouldn't deliver, their incompetence became self-evident. Henderson, as Alex predicted, accidentally slow-walked a major contract. When I confronted him with the evidence, he opted for early retirement rather than being fired. One by one, the remnants of the old regime removed themselves. It was a ruthless but necessary process. We weren't just getting rid of toxic individuals. We were getting rid of a mindset that had been holding the company back for years. While this internal restructuring was happening, Alex and I were laser-focused on making the Vance Vanguard a long-term success. The initial launch was a hit, but we needed to maintain the momentum. "We need a star," Alex said during a strategy meeting. "An author who can become the face of this imprint. Someone bold, new, and impossible to ignore." "You have someone in mind?" I asked. "I do," he said, a glint in his eye. "Her name is Isabella Rossi. She's a performance poet from Brooklyn. Her work is raw, powerful, and utterly original. Every major publisher has turned her down. They say she's too niche." "Niche sounds perfect to me," I said. Alex arranged a meeting. We met Isabella at a coffee shop in the East Village. She had electric blue hair, tattooed arms, and an intensity that made you unable to look away. She regarded us with the skepticism of an artist who had been rejected one too many times. "So another dying publisher wants to cash in on my Instagram following?" she asked bluntly. I laughed. "No, a dying publisher wants to give you a platform to set the world on fire. We don't want to change a word of your work. We want to amplify it. We'll build the entire next issue of Vanguard around you. Your poems and in-depth interview videos of your performances. You won't be a part of the issue. You'll be the issue." She looked at me for a long moment, then at Alex. "You people are crazy," she said. But for the first time, a smile touched her lips. "Okay, I'm in." Working with Isabella was a breath of fresh air. Her energy was infectious. She pushed my designers, challenged our editors. She made the project her own. When the issue featuring Isabella dropped, it sent a shockwave through the literary world. It sparked debates. It was shared thousands of times. It took the Vance Vanguard from being an interesting experiment to a cultural force to be reckoned with. Other writers who previously would have never considered a small press like us started sending us their manuscripts. We were on a roll, for real. One evening, Alex and I were working late, looking over the soaring subscription numbers. The office was quiet, save for the sound of our keyboards. "You know, we've made something pretty incredible here," he said, turning in his chair to face me. "We make a pretty good team," I agreed, smiling at him. The moment stretched. There was a current in the air between us that we had both been trying to ignore for weeks. It wasn't just professional respect anymore. It was deeper than that. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. "Lily," he said, his back still to me. "I need to say this, and it's probably unprofessional, but I can't hold it in anymore." He turned around, and the intensity in his eyes made me hold my breath. "I'm falling in love with you," he said. "Not because you're my boss, or because you saved this company. I'm falling for the person you are. Your resilience, your creativity, the way you see the world. And I know you just got out of hell, and you're probably not ready, But I had to tell you. My heart was hammering. A part of me wanted to run. Mark's voice was still there whispering that I was damaged, that I could never trust again. But another bigger, stronger part recognized the difference. Alex's gaze wasn't possessive. It was admiring. He didn't want to control me. He wanted to stand beside me. I walked toward him. "I'm feeling it too," I whispered, and I realized it was true. "I'm terrified, Alex, but I'm feeling it too." He didn't rush. He simply reached out and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear. "Then we'll be terrified together," he said, and he kissed me. It was a soft, gentle kiss, but it held all the promise of a new beginning. It felt like coming home. But when I got to my apartment that night, feeling happy and hopeful, there was a formal-looking envelope on my doormat. It had been delivered by courier. Inside was a thick sheaf of legal documents. It was a lawsuit from Mark Hayes. He wasn't just suing me, he was suing Vance Publishing. He was claiming that the entire idea for the Vance Vanguard, the digital imprint, the subscription model, the focus on new talent, was intellectual property I had developed while at Oratech. He was claiming I had stolen his idea, and he wanted a piece of the profits. The lawsuit was a grenade thrown into my rare moment of peace. All the warmth and hope from Alex's kiss was replaced by a cold fury. Mark wasn't just trying to claim money. He was trying to steal my story again. He was trying to rewrite history, to make my success his. The next morning, I was in Mr. Kensington's office, the documents spread across his desk. "Is this a joke?" I asked. Mr. Kensington read through them, his expression unreadable. "No, this is not a joke. This is a tactic. It's called a SLAP suit, a strategic lawsuit against public participation. It's designed not to be won, but to drain you financially and emotionally, to force you into a settlement." "I'm not settling," I said, my voice hard. "He took everything from me once. He's not getting this." "I'm glad to hear you say that," Mr. Kensington said with a faint smile, "because his case is weak. He would have to prove that you created a specific, detailed business plan for a digital imprint while you were married to him and working for his company. Does he have any such proof?" I shook my head. "No." This idea was born out of Eleanor's notes and our own desperation. "It has nothing to do with Oratech." "Then we will fight it," Mr. Kensington said. "We'll file for an immediate dismissal. But be prepared, Lily. He's going to make this ugly. He'll try to drag your past into it everything. He will try to paint you as a bitter, disgruntled ex-wife, out for revenge." I knew he was right. This was going to be a battle of narratives. His story against mine. Instead of letting the lawsuit paralyze us, I decided to use it as fuel. It solidified my resolve to make Vance Publishing into something Mark could never touch, something that was wholly mine and Eleanor's. "We need to think bigger," I told Alex and my new leadership team. "The Vance Vanguard is a success, but it's just the start. We can't just be a company that reacts to trends. We need to create them." This was when the true vision began to take shape. It wasn't just about saving a publishing house anymore. It was about redefining what it meant to be one in the 21st century. Our first major initiative was the Cornerstone Project. The idea was simple. We would use a portion of the profits from Vanguard to fund no-strings-attached grants for first-time authors from underrepresented communities. They wouldn't just get a book deal. They'd get a mentor from our editorial staff, marketing support, and a large enough advance that they could actually take a year to write without worrying about paying their rent. "We're not just buying books," I explained to the team. "We're investing in people. We're building the next generation of talent. The second initiative was even more ambitious: the Vance Archives. We had a treasure trove of out-of-print titles from the press's 70-year history. Many of them were forgotten gems. We began a massive project to digitize our entire backlist and make it available through a subscription model, creating a Netflix for classic literature. It was a huge investment of time and money, but it would create a long-term revenue stream and solidify our position as guardians of literary heritage. Working on these projects was an antidote to the poison of the lawsuit. While Mark's lawyers were trying to dig up dirt on my past, I was busy building the future. My relationship with Alex deepened as well. He was my rock. When I'd get a demanding letter from Mark's lawyers, he'd be there to remind me of all we were accomplishing. When I doubted myself, he'd hand me a manuscript from one of the Cornerstone Project authors and say, "This is why we do this." We kept our relationship private, at least at the office. We didn't want it to become a source of gossip or distraction, but everyone could see our partnership. We finished each other's sentences in meetings. We had a shorthand that couldn't be faked. We were a team in every sense of the word. One evening, we were at my apartment cooking dinner together. The noise of the lawsuit and the company seemed far away. "Do you ever miss designing?" he asked, stirring pasta sauce. "I mean, full-time." I thought for a moment. I've realized I still am. I'm not designing websites anymore. I'm designing a company. I'm designing a platform for other people. It's more fulfilling than anything I ever did at Oratech. It was true. I had found my purpose. It wasn't just about proving Mark wrong anymore. It was about proving Eleanor right. A few weeks later, we had our first showcase for the Cornerstone Project. We flew the 5 selected authors to New York. They were a diverse group: a former teacher from Detroit, a young immigrant from El Salvador, a single mother from Appalachia. Seeing the excitement and gratitude in their eyes as we handed them their checks and introduced them to their mentors was one of the proudest moments of my life. That night, after the event, Alex and I took a walk through Central Park. The autumn air was crisp. I said, "Mark thinks he's suing us over an idea, but he's got it all wrong. The real idea wasn't Vanguard. The real idea is this. It's believing in people. It's creating opportunities. He could never understand that, and that's why he'll never win." Alex stopped and turned to me. "I love the way your mind works. You're just saying that because I just signed a bunch of big checks," I teased. "No," he said, his voice serious. He took my hands. "I love you because you have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever met, even after everything you've been through." I looked into his eyes, and I knew that no matter what Mark threw at me, I was going to be okay. I had a purpose. I had a partner. I had a new vision. But I had underestimated Mark's capacity for cruelty. I thought he would fight this in the courtroom. I hadn't realized he was willing to make this fight public, a fight where he would use his most powerful weapon, shame. He was about it to try and take not just my company, but my dignity. The preparation for the hearing to dismiss Mark's lawsuit dragged on for weeks. Mr. Kensington's legal team was meticulous, gathering every piece of evidence, every email, every note from the early days of the Vance Vanguard to prove its independent genesis. I spent hours in depositions, a grueling process that forced me to relive every decision. Meanwhile, Mark was playing a different game in the court of public opinion. He'd hired a top PR firm, and suddenly, stories began appearing in blogs and gossip columns. They never directly violated the court's gag order, but they painted an insidious picture. Stories about the misunderstood genius, Mark Hayes, and his ambitious ex-wife. They implied that I had used the divorce as a springboard to launch my own career, using ideas that were incubated under his roof. It was a whisper campaign designed to poison the jury pool of public opinion before we ever stepped into the courtroom. I tried to ignore it, but it was hard. Every time I saw my name in a headline, it was a small cut. "He's trying to get a rise out of you," Alex said one evening when he found me staring at a particularly nasty article. "He wants you to react emotionally. Don't give him the satisfaction." He was right. My silence was my power. I let our work speak for itself. The Cornerstone Project got positive coverage in the New York Times. The Vance Archives was praised by literary scholars. We were building a narrative of innovation and empowerment, while Mark was building one of bitterness and revenge. But his final move was more personal and more cruel than anything I could have imagined. A week before the hearing, Mr. Kensington called me to his office. His voice on the phone was grave. "Lily Mark's team just filed their evidence list. There's something you need to see." When I arrived, he handed me a tablet. On the screen was a scanned copy of a small, leather-bound notebook. I recognized it instantly. It was my personal journal, the one I had kept for the last few years of my marriage, where I had poured out all my frustrations, my fears, and yes, my creative ideas. I thought I'd thrown it out when I left the house. Apparently not. Mark had kept it. He wouldn't. I whispered, the blood draining from my face. "Oh, he would," Mr. Kensington said grimly. "They're not just submitting it. They've cherry-picked excerpts. They're going to argue that your rambling entries about starting over and building something of my own are proof you were plotting to leave him and steal his ideas all along." But that wasn't the worst part. I scrolled through the marked pages. Mark had highlighted every entry where I wrote about my insecurities, about my feelings of being a failure, about the depression I had struggled with. He had also highlighted pages where I'd sketched out random ideas, not business plans, but dreams, ideas for an art journal, a gallery, a creative co-op. Taken out of context, they could be twisted to look like the foundation of a business plan. He was going to use my most vulnerable words against me. He was going to stand up in court and read my most private thoughts to the world, not to prove a legal point, but to humiliate me, to break me. It was the ultimate move of an abuser. If he couldn't control me, he would try to destroy me. I went home in a daze. All the fight had gone out of me, replaced by a profound sense of violation. That journal had been my only sanctuary during the darkest years. It was the one place I could be myself, weak and scared. And now, he was going to turn it into a weapon. Alex came over bringing dinner. He saw my face and knew instantly something was wrong. I showed him the documents. He read them, his expression growing darker and more furious with every page. When he was done, he didn't say anything. He just came over and held me. I broke down in his arms, letting out the dry, ragged sobs I'd been holding back. "He's going to win," I cried. "He's going to get up there and make me look like a crazy, unstable wreck. Everyone will believe him." "No, they won't," Alex said, his voice fierce. He took me by the shoulders and looked me straight in the eye. "Lily, listen to me. He thinks this is his ultimate weapon. He thinks shame will make you crumble. But he's made a fatal mistake. He has underestimated you." "How?" I whispered. "Because he doesn't realize that journal isn't proof of your weakness. It's proof of your strength," he said. "It shows a woman who was trapped in an unbearable situation, but who was still dreaming. still creating, still hoping. He thinks he's showing the world your scars. But what they're going to see is a survivor. His words began to cut through the fog of my despair. Don't let him turn your story into a tragedy, Alex continued. Take it back. Own it. Walk into that courtroom and tell them the truth. The whole truth. Don't just defend against his lies. Show them who he really is. A tiny spark ignited in me. He was right. I had spent so much time reacting to Mark's attacks. I had been playing defense. It was time to go on the offensive. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat down with a new notepad and a pen. I started writing. I wrote down everything I could remember about my marriage. Every little slight, every manipulative act, every stolen idea. I dug up old emails, text messages. I created my own arsenal, built from the truth. By the time the sun came up, I had a plan. I called Mr. Kensington. I want to testify, I told him, and I don't just want to answer questions. I want to tell my story. There was a silence on the other end of the line. Then Mr. Kensington said, "That's a risk, Lily. The cross-examination will be brutal." "I know," I said, "but it's the only risk worth taking. He wants to turn this trial into a personal circus." "Fine, but I'm going to be the ringmaster." On the day of the hearing, when I walked into the courthouse, I felt a strange sense of calm. Alex was by my side. As we sat down, I saw Mark across the room. He looked at me and smiled a smug, vicious smile. He thought he had already won. He thought he had broken me. He had no idea he had just handed me the most powerful weapon I could possibly have. He had given me the stage to speak my truth, and the truth was about to be set free. The courtroom was cold and formal, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos raging inside me. Mark's lawyer, a slick man with a sharp smile, began his presentation. He painted a picture of Mark as a brilliant entrepreneur, a visionary who had been betrayed by his jealous wife. He talked about the creative environment Mark had provided and how I had absorbed his ideas like a sponge. And then he produced my journal. "Your Honor," he said, with theatrical gravity, "we have here the private thoughts of Ms. Hayes herself, written during the time she was plotting to leave her husband. They show a calculating mind, collecting ideas for her next venture, all while being funded by her husband's generosity." He began to read. He had chosen the worst excerpts, brutally ripped from any context. He read my lines about feeling trapped, but presented them as me complaining about a life of luxury. He read my sketches of artistic ideas and called them irrefutable proof of business planning. Every word was a blow. I could feel the eyes of everyone in the courtroom on me. I looked over at Mark. He was leaning back in his chair, clearly enjoying every moment of my public flagellation. This was his final revenge. When it was Mr. Kensington's turn, he simply said, "Your Honor, we have no questions for this witness. Instead, we call Lily Hayes to the stand." A murmur went through the room. The move was unconventional. I walked to the stand, my heart pounding, but my steps were steady. I sat down, looking directly at the judge, an older woman with intelligent, no-nonsense eyes. Mr. Kensington started simply, asking me about my educational background, about the early days of Oratech, about my role in creating the brand identity. Then he turned to the journal. "Ms. Hayes, opposing counsel, has read excerpts from your personal journal. Did he leave anything out?" "Yes," I said, my voice clear and strong. "He left out the truth." And then I began to speak. I didn't just answer questions. I told a story. Your Honor, that journal was not a business plan. It was a life raft, I said. I wrote in it because I was in a marriage where my voice had been taken from me. I was married to a man who convinced me that my ideas were worthless, that my ambition was shameful, and that my sensitivity was a weakness. I looked directly at Mark. My ex-husband did not foster creativity. He caged it. Anytime I had an idea, he would call it cute or naive. 6 months later, that same idea would show up in a company presentation presented as his own. Mark's lawyer jumped to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. This is irrelevant. It's entirely relevant, Your Honor, Mr. Kensington countered. It speaks directly to the issue of who the innovator was in this relationship. Objection, overruled, the judge said. Continue, Ms. Hayes. That journal, I continued, was the only place I could safely dream. Yes, I wrote about starting over because I was desperate to escape a man who told me every single day, in 1,000 different ways, that I was nothing without him. I wrote about art projects because I was forbidden from pursuing any in the real world. Then we presented our evidence. Emails from Mark disparaging my designs. Testimony from a former Oratech colleague who had witnessed Mark taking credit for one of my major projects. Text messages where Mark advised me not to attend key meetings. We painted a picture not of a scheming wife, but of a decade-long campaign of emotional abuse and professional sabotage. And now, as for the idea for the Vance Vanguard, I said, that idea did not come from this journal. It came from the notes of Eleanor Vance, a woman who believed in me. It came from desperation when the company was on the brink of collapse. And it came from my expertise, the very design and tech expertise my ex-husband tried to convince me I didn't have. I turned to the judge. Your Honor, this lawsuit is not about intellectual property. It is about control. My ex-husband cannot stand the thought of me succeeding without him. When I refused to take him back, he decided to destroy me. He allied with my enemies within my own company. He leaked stories to the press. And when all that failed, he used his final weapon. He took my most private, vulnerable thoughts and tried to turn them into a public spectacle of humiliation. I held up the journal. He thought this book was proof of my weakness. But he is wrong. This book is the only proof left that even in the darkest moments, the woman who wrote it was still alive. She was still fighting. And today, she is done telling her story. I put the journal down. The room was completely silent. I glanced at Mark. The smugness was gone from his face. In its place was a raw, impotent fury. For the first time, he had lost control of the narrative. The judge did not take long. After reviewing the evidence presented, she said, looking over her glasses, "It is abundantly clear that this lawsuit is without merit. There is no credible evidence that the plaintiff created the idea in question. There is, on the contrary, an abundance of evidence suggesting a disturbing pattern of behavior by the plaintiff to sabotage the defendant's career." She looked directly at Mark. Mr. Hayes, the use of a person's private journal in this manner is not only morally reprehensible, but it suggests a desperation that is inconsistent with a legitimate legal claim. This case is dismissed with prejudice. That meant he could never file it again. And furthermore, the judge added her voice, like ice, the court is imposing sanctions on the plaintiff and his legal team for the filing of a frivolous lawsuit designed to harass and intimidate. You will be paying Ms. Hayes's full legal fees. The gavel fell. It was over. As I walked out of the courthouse, back into the sunlight, I felt 10 years lighter. Alex was there, and he wrapped me in a fierce hug. "I told you," he whispered. "A fighter. Reporters swarmed us. But for once, I wasn't afraid. I walked to the microphones. Today, justice was served," I said simply. My ex-husband tried to use the legal system to continue the abuse he started years ago. He failed. I want to send a message to anyone who is in a similar situation. Do not let anyone silence you. Your truth is your power. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a publishing house to run. As we walked away, I looked back and saw Mark surrounded by reporters shouting questions at him. He looked small and pathetic. He was no longer the monster in my head. He was just a petty man who had run out of tricks. He was finally out of my story. The victory in court was more than a personal vindication. It was a liberation for Vance Publishing. Mark's lawsuit had been a dark cloud hanging over us, creating uncertainty and making potential partners hesitant. With it so decisively and humiliatingly dismissed, the cloud vanished, leaving nothing but clear, open sky. The story of our legal battle became something of a legend in the industry. It positioned us not just as innovators, but as underdogs who weren't afraid to fight for what they believed in. Authors wanted to work with us. Investors who had previously shied away were now calling. We were cool. Alex and I didn't waste a second. We rode the momentum. "Our empire will not be built on revenge," I told him. "It will be built on creativity." We expanded the Cornerstone Project, doubling the number of grants we offered. We partnered with universities to create mentorship programs for writing students. We launched Vance Voices, an audiobook division, using talented but unknown actors to bring our stories to life. Every decision we made was driven by a single question: does this serve the artist? It was a radical departure from the rest of the publishing industry, which was increasingly obsessed with celebrity book deals and profit margins. We were a haven for true talent, and it worked. One of our first Cornerstone authors, the single mother from Appalachia, wrote a stunning debut novel. It won the National Book Award. In her acceptance speech, she tearfully thanked Vance Publishing for believing in a voice that everyone else said was too small to be heard. Our website crashed from the traffic that night. I was no longer an interim CEO trying to survive a year. I was a builder. Every day I came to the office with a sense of joy and purpose. It didn't feel like work anymore. It felt like a mission. My relationship with Alex flourished too. Freed from the shadow of the lawsuit, we could finally breathe. We went public with our relationship at the company holiday party. There were no gasps, just smiles and congratulations. Everyone had seen it. We were a power couple, but not in the way Mark had envisioned. Our power came not from one dominating the other, but from our partnership. We challenged each other, supported each other, and made each other better. He was the first person to read everything I wrote, and I was the first to see everything he edited. We were partners in every sense of the word. 1 year to the day after I first walked into the Vance building, Mr. Kensington called a meeting. The 3 remaining board members who had chosen to stay and support me were there. "Lily," Mr. Kensington began, "as per the will of Eleanor Vance, your 1-year probationary period is over. I have here the final financial report." He pushed a folder across the table. I opened it, my heart beating fast, though I already knew the answer. The numbers were staggering. We weren't just profitable, We were spectacularly profitable. Revenue was up 300%. The Vance Vanguard had over 100,000 paid subscribers. Our new graphic novel line was a runaway hit. "Congratulations, Ms. Hayes." One of the board members said, his smile genuine. "You didn't just save this company. You resurrected it." Eleanor would be very, very proud. A wave of relief and pride washed over me. I had done it. I had passed the impossible test, which means Mr. Kensington said that you are now the undisputed owner of Vance Publishing and the unrestricted beneficiary of the remainder of the Vance estate, which has now grown in value to nearly $55 million. The number was so large, it was almost meaningless. A year ago, I was celebrating finding an intact slice of pizza in a dumpster. Now, I was running a small empire and was a multimillionaire. That night, to celebrate, Alex and I didn't go to a fancy restaurant. We ordered pizza and ate it on the floor of my apartment, just as we had on so many late work nights. "So, how does it feel to be a publishing tycoon?" he teased. "Quiet," I said, and was surprised to find it was true. All the noise, Mark's voice in my head, the old board's doubt, the panic about failing, it's all gone. There's just quiet. "That's the sound of victory," he said softly. "No," I said, looking at him, "it's the sound of being free." We talked about the future, about all the things we wanted to build. A London office, a charitable foundation to promote literacy. The possibilities were endless. But as we were dreaming, I realized there was one question that remained unanswered, one final piece of the puzzle that was missing. "Why me?" I asked Alex. "I still don't really get it." Eleanor could have chosen anyone, an industry veteran, an experienced CEO. Why did she bet her entire legacy on a stranger on the verge of collapse? It was the one question that had been gnawing at me for a year. I had proven I could do it, but I had never understood why she believed I could in the first place. As if fate had heard me, my phone rang the next morning. It was Mr. Kensington's assistant. "Mr. Kensington has something for you," she said. He said Ms. Vance left specific instructions for it to be delivered only after the year was up and only if you succeeded. A thrill of anticipation and nerves shot through me. The final mystery of Eleanor Vance was about to be revealed. I arrived at Mr. Kensington's office with a sense of ceremony. He didn't keep me waiting. He showed me into his conference room, and on the polished mahogany table sat a single object, an old, intricately carved cedar box. "Eleanor kept this in her office for years," Mr. Kensington said. "She called it her contingency box. There is a letter inside. She wrote it about 6 months before her death, after her investigator had found evidence of your